Good evening and welcome to the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum. Very pleased to have you all here tonight. Thank you so much for your patience as we get started a few minutes late. My name is Erin McCluskey. I'm the Public Education Manager here, and I'm very pleased to welcome Susan Brown is our Assistant Curator of Textiles, who's put together the beautiful fashioning felt show that I hope you'll get to enjoy upstairs, and has also put together this wonderful panel for us tonight. So, Susan Brown.
Thank you for coming. I'm so pleased to be able to share one more evening with Claudy Jongstra and Kathryn Walter during their stay here in New York. So first, congratulations to both of you for your beautiful work in the exhibition. I hope that all of you have seen the show, and if you'll note that their works are literally in opposing corners of the gallery. Claudy's piece is two inwardly curving forms of rich red and earthy brown, intensely evoking not only the human hand, but also the plant and animal worlds. Kathryn's piece is an austere, stone-like wall made from recovered offcuts of industrial felt in all of its variable shades of gray. Claudia is a Dutch artist whose closeness to the source of her materials gives her work an immediacy and raw power. Kathryn is an artist, designer, teacher, writer, and curator who has an unusually creative and fertile relationship with an industrial material, with felt as both a material and an industry. But both women are deeply connected to their history through their work. Claudia to the indigenous plants and animals of Holland and the skills that have developed around those resources, and Kathryn to the social and economic history of this ubiquitous industrial material. Please welcome Claudy Jongstra.
When I first started felt making, I was intrigued by this wonderful material and the simplicity of making it, and been doing it now for 15 years. Is this project, what you see here, is most recent and also very opposite of how I started. This is a very delicate interior for a ethical bank in Holland, and it's an inlay mosaic with soft merinos and raw silks in vegetable dyes. You see the closeness of it. We still also use in these very delicate designs raw materials as the Drent heat come from our own sheep. Cochineal, Dutch madder, the red color which belongs to the Dutch history. It is a very typical Dutch plant, and the color comes from the root. It takes 3 years to generate this color, so it's very intense even before coloring. This was one recent project also for a children's hospital. What I like more and more is that the work has been used in places where you can even, it's so-called this healing architecture. It's an institution here where young children stay for many years, and by bringing softness into their environment, also when their parents see this work, it makes them feel comfortable, and also it's at ease, and that it's fun, and that is really coming closer to their soul. It's all been built up by layers, and it's a work which combines 3 stores, departments, or I don't know how you call it, but it has a it's the color is so rich and bright, but and invites you to touch, and we are always allowed people, even in public spaces, to touch the work. You see more of the layering. The colors used are madder and also walnut. This is also a recent project we did for private residence. Wall tapestries hang loose from the bottom of the house, 4 meters high, and it gives it, like in ancient times, a very comfortable feeling, using the fibers, the silk fibers as brushes were they laid down in this pattern. A year ago, I started making also so-called free works of art, and these are the first expressions of these works. It was in a gallery in the Netherlands, and I focused on black and whites, because then for me it's like a new start in a new direction, and could focus much more to the material than to the design. So these are really expressions from the heart, and it was a very simple, basic, very basic installation. Details using the very specific long-haired Drent heat. We have a herd of 200 of these sheep, and these sheep provide our materials. But they, what is more important for me now is that they preserve landscape. So they work in Holland on beautiful landscapes, and they do the work machines cannot do. There are only 1,000 of them left, and we have 200 of them. So we're keeping also this indigenous species alive. Also, what I did last year was an installation together with a Dutch painter, Mark Mulders. These are like I think 120 of these voile big banners, and what I wanted to say in this work of art is an experience in color, but also in mood, as you have maybe experienced also in the exhibition. But this is more the very delicate form of it, and you enter this exhibition hall, and you can really withdraw in this specific spaces. The color matter is what I told you, very typical Dutch, but also what is very important to know, that one of the medical properties of this root is that it was used for in old days for people having problems with health. So learning about these plants and about their heritage, also learning about their specific qualities, and you can beautiful work with these metaphors in works of art. It was a very, for me it was a very impressive installation, and also the first one really in this scale. This is the public library in Amsterdam. A detail of it is on the catalogue, and working with the architect Jo Koenen was really a privilege, because he offered us a complete wall, and he said, "This is the wall. Do whatever you want to do." So we not often get this opportunity working so freely, and we chosen for these so-called guipures. It's a knotting technique from the 17th century, using in clothing, and it almost works in this scale as a calligraphy. Many we live in the countryside, and many women they still can do this spinning technique, but when you are a very good spinner, then you spin very regular. So we had to train them in doing what they were not allowed to do. So they had to spin very irregular and do things which they were not used to do. But it was it was a lot of fun working with them. We combined also silk threads with the Drent heat in this knotting. And this is also a wall in this entrance of the library. It is totally covered with a very tight but very structured felt, and it had to be because 3 million people come there yearly. And what is very funny now, that we see that as we allow people to touch the work, that people are making like little dreadlocks, or they're doing their own. It's an interactive wall in a different way, and it's very nice seeing that. And this color is from the Reseda luteola. It's a color. It's a plant which is very dependent on light, and so when there is a year more sunlight, the harvest will change because of dependence of really specific sunlight. So you cannot control it completely, and that's very nice about vegetable dyeing. This was an extreme project in Holland. It's a city hall, and this is called inside the city hall. This is called the Blue Diamond. It's the room where the mayor has his conferences, and it's also used as a wedding room. The size, the height is 12 meters, so it's really a big tent, and it's you could also see as a yurt. We covered it all with indigo felts, and they were made all at one piece, and also using this knotting technique in some of the panels, as you see here. We worked on this project for 3 years. We started up with the architect, so that was very nice. From day one, we were discussing about forms and coloring and design. This is the inside of this. The blue diamond, and it's really a strange experience going in this very closed combine, and it feels like a cathedral or a room where you can meditate, and the sound is very important. So we often also work with acoustic engineers who testing our materials and giving us instructions about thickness and quality and if they should shine or not. This is the inside. All of them covered with felts. Also, there was a very not restricted project for us. There was a lot of freedom in design. Another hall in this city hall is a room where there are conferences, and we made 16 banners, 4 meter high, and they hang loose. You see there here. All been dyed with vegetable dyes, with walnuts and the wow. It's a detail. It's very rich textiles in the layering. You see the shininess of the silk coming through. Also parts of this installation. And the last thing we did in this project was the theater. We covered all of the walls with an upholstery, like a wallpaper, in the madder color, in different structures and designs. It was a very. This was our largest project. It was we made I think nearly 1,000 square meters of felts. This is the embassy in Berlin. There was a problem with the acoustic in this space, and also the people working there experienced the room as a bit dark and not very bright. So they asked us to make a work of happiness or bringing sunlight inside. So we used a lot of the wow plant in this project, and these are in fact panels with acoustic material behind it to solve this problem. This is the color cochineal, the pink one. These are details of these panels. It's like a marqueterie. We build it up. We work with the fibers as inlays. It's very intense work. This is a piece for a museum in Holland, 18th century rooms, and they asked us to make a contemporary piece of carpet, and it integrates very naturally in its surroundings. And we use also the madder color in this project. This is also in this museum. It's the China room, and we made it in a huge indigo carpet with the Drent heat and silks and Wensleydale fabrics, very raw edges, and it's going very organically in its surroundings. Also, for the windows, we made very delicate hangings. Here with linen and merino and organzas. This is a private residence. We made a carpet, very huge. Also, when we make these big pieces, we usually it takes more than a week. We have a studio of 8, and the yarns have to be woven first, and then we build it up. So this is because it's also a very you have to make a very strong carpet. It needs to be very thick and very tight. These are panels also for private residence with acoustic materials behind it. Only structures. The house is in a very important landscape, and the people wanted, the customers would like the outside, inside, inside, outside idea. So very natural and very modest, but beautiful in its simplicity, I think. The Kunsthal in Rotterdam. You made also a wall covering in the building of Koolhaas. He used a lot of concrete, so the materials we used were yak hair, which is very rough and raw, and we made like a big woven pattern, and these threads we made by hand. There was 3,000 of them. It was a big challenge, and also to scale it up, it is sometimes very complicated because you only see the result really when you have it upholstered. So we usually work with maquettes, but it's the upscaling is very difficult. This is a restaurant in Holland, also tapestries with huge forms with silks and different materials. Very traditional way of hanging. This is a big panel for the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, with only in black and whites and with textures and structures, also with the guipure technique, as you see. Also very transparent pieces for the museum, with very raw materials as alpaca and cashmere using in the flower design. Our famous carpets, like skins, they lay on the floor. People often think that they are really animal, but they are just wool, and follow the form of the shaven pieces. Very delicate window screens. All being done hand cut, and this is the Dutch White House. Here is for us it was a very important commission. This is where the president lives, and there were wall coverings all over, and they hang loose on the bottom, which gives a very relaxed feeling when you are in the room. And it was the fabrics are made out of silks and wool. And they hang the paintings. They hang just before them, just as they did in the old days. This is another room in this house. In Mother of Pearl, we call this design, and they all hang loose also. And there are pieces in one. We made them in one piece. So it was also, as you know, that felt making is also a process of shrinking. You have to double them. So at the end, it was a terrible weight. Carpets in black, huge size. It's an ink spot. This is a hotel in Amsterdam. It's the Lloyd Hotel. We made shutters, and it was the first project where we used the vegetable dyes. And there are 15 of them, and if you close them, you see like one Japanese flower garden with birds and different trees and flowers. Details of it, very delicate. They're put onto an aluminium construction. Kathryn.
Thanks, and thanks, Claudia. I'm pleased to be here. I hope you find that my work maybe is somewhat of a compliment to your work, as Susan had mentioned earlier. I'm working with felt that's already made, so as opposed to making it. But yeah, and it's interesting. I think that we've both come from a different sort of personal connection to the material. As Susan mentioned, it's a family connection for me. And just briefly, I tell you sort of the story. My great-grandfather actually emigrated from Germany and came to Canada and started a company importing felt from Germany, and over the years it's sort of expanded its product base and worked with North American manufacturers. And now my brother, who's the fourth generation, is running the business, and he's my supplier. So it sort of comes back to in the blood, I guess. And so I've combined this personal influence, I guess, with my interest in visual art and cultural studies, which is my background and sort of trajectory of study. And I sort of started this Felt Studio, which is this company I founded, sort of following this research project that I did for the Textile Museum in Canada. And it was looking at the social history of felt in Canada, and I called it Beaver Hats to Hockey Pads. And it played up on some of the sort of cliches that some of you may know or associate with Canadian kind of stereotypes, and played up on that. And but it was an interesting history to trace, actually, from the fur trade, where the millinery trade really drove the fur trade, where the sort of wealth of beavers that were found in North America were used to make these hats. And on the left, the Cavalier-style hats are all the felt hats made out of beaver pelts. And on the right, we see the famous Terry Sawchuk, who's the hockey player sporting the felt shoulder pads, and no doubt he has felt shin pads and knee pads, and it was used for a lot of that sporting equipment. Also, again, the wilderness tips, the sort of insulators, filters used in camping experience, and even a maple syrup filter is used on the right. And then actually one slide that got lost, and I had a couple of slides got lost in my translation and burning my disc, but also the Mountie hat was included, and of course the cold weather gear, the footwear for the Canadian climate. Yeah, in fact, that was sort of one of the impetus of my entrepreneurial sort of side of my great-grandfather, sort of finding that, the Canadian climate was a good place to be have felt company. So I included this image. It's more of a North American general sort of image, but just to remind us that indeed the industrial felt is made for industrial applications, and it is aligned very much with sort of the steel industry, and as we can see, the car industry, and an amazing number of parts that are actually made from felt, because it is great for pads and liners and wicking and gaskets and seals and all kinds of industrial materials that wool is really great for. And some of these things have been replaced now by newer materials, but really I think felt still does remain unsurpassed in some certain applications, and of course I'm interested in keeping it alive. So I will show you actually the sort of a range of projects that I've done that make use of felt in different ways. A project that I did here, sort of following my interest in material culture, I did this project that is my kind of Robert Morris meets Martha Stewart. It's 124 pieces of felt, sort of a DIY sort of guide to rustic modern living. And I also, part of what runs through a lot of my work is this interest in maximizing the yield of material. So I took it to an extreme and looked at the physical properties that I mentioned in that felt is used in, like, cushioning, padding, lining, all these things, and I applied it to sort of the home, and was interested in anything that's sort of ranging from pot holders to weather stripping, and the kind of the scope of felt. And so through this, it was kind of a fun, playful, as I say, a guide to rustic modern living. And I I actually took the form of an installation here to a room installation that I exhibited as a part of an alternative design show in Toronto. And you can see each piece is made from either one square or one rectangle of felt, or in some cases they've been stitched together. But it's sort of just a matter of sort of how it's stitched or folded or put together. Felt is such a sculptural material. And this was kind of a fun piece also. I took the same idea into the fashion world and created this sort of product. It was called Shelter. That was kind of a collection of apparel that doubled as survival gear, which again played up on the physical properties of felt, and being that of sort of the insulator and the all of those, the filter. And So in this case here, the hat is the filter, the cape can be a tent, and it sort of goes through. Again, each thing is made from one square or rectangle of felt and sort of takes it to an extreme. This one here, the breastplate and doubles as a mask. I added this because it was funny, this bit in Harper's, the same moment I made this, it's kind of just one of those funny intersections that this was not a felt prototype, but I know another non-woven that was actually published as a prototype that was produced. So it's just a funny coincidence. I include this piece because it sort of goes without saying. I think a lot of people may know, of course, working with industrial felt often conjures reference to Joseph Beuys, who is the German artist famous for working with industrial felt. And he, of course, was also quite known for working with fat, so this was my tribute to him. It was my butter dish for Joseph Beuys. And I use that just to sort of show, too, that I'm really interested in the way that felt is about sculpture, too, that the building with it. I'm very interested in how we can shape it and work with it as a sculptural medium. And this chair sort of exemplifies that in that it sort of uses the felt as, of course, the surface, because it is that, but as well as the structure. And here, and again, back to the maximum yield, I've just made this chair out of the 6 lineal yards of material, and in this case, stripped into 2-foot wide strips, and the seats folded and bolted across 4 metal rods, and then the rest is sort of wrapped and rolled around 4 vertical posts, and those extend to make the legs. I've done a little bit of furnishings, not a lot, but earlier on I was doing the chair and this lamp, and this sort of introduces also my interest in working with remnants and sort of recovering industrial materials and the felts that are clearance stock or offcuts and remnants. And this is actually a waste material. The shade is made from a die-cut waste material. The whole is the actual product, and it's a precision cut plug that's used to clean machinery, machine parts, tubes, and machines. So yeah, as I say, I'm sort of looking at kind of different streams that run through my practice. The architectural projects started in Toronto, working with local architects. This was one I did with Johnson Chu Architects, the office lounge space. This rippling effect, almost like a corrugated texture that we came to terms with over sort of a course of dealing with the site, looking at aesthetic issues, acoustic issues, and budget and site specifications, and we came up with this, and limiting it to certain areas, and it works well to sort of reflect sound against the glass, or as a contrast to the glass. And I've carried different kinds of textural ways to work with the felt into different projects where acoustics is an issue. And in this case, this was a Charles Street Video post-production editing house where we did this suite. Actually, it was commissioned to replace an acoustic treatment that had basically fallen apart, actually, and felt, of course, has got great longevity. But so I did this, and I created these receding squares to make this pyramid shape in this tiling effect to mimic sort of some of the cone kind of wave-like shapes of a lot of commercial acoustic material. And I think the ability of felt to absorb sound is sort of enhanced by that variation in surface texture. I took the similar kind of strategy in this hotel room. It's a tiling effect, and here the felt's just manipulated a square, a circle shape is manipulated to create a convex shape. It gives the same kind of effect. And here another commission, a collaboration with Jabu Puschelberg in a hotel in Seattle, a model suite. Here the designers were interested in having a sort of an organic, they sort of wanted something kind of graphic yet organic, and they were interested in having a handmade look. And so I came up with this woven treatment. This again it's not really chronological. This is actually just going back to another stream of an aspect of felt studio work, a bit more of a design build kind of emphasis where, in this case, Bruce Mau's office had contacted me because they were had the signage contract for the Walt Disney Concert Hall and wanted to use felt for the donor wall. So I did prototype development for them, and if it was their design, their font, they wanted to do these cutout letters and fill them with the stainless steel letters. So we created the samples and worked with an AutoCAD file basically to actually produce the prototypes. And this is actually represented in the exhibition. It's sort of a one stream that I did with Diller Scofidio Renfro, and these panels were created for their offices. And it was, again, they had an idea, design, and we produced but there was a kind of dialogue between they wanted to layer it with polycarbonate, so there was a conversation about how to do that, and we fabricated the panels, creating this sort of sandwich of felt, polycarbonate, and felt. And so we had to register the felts over the polycarbonate, so you had this kind of element of transparency, and they created the steel frame that we made, so we made the panels to their site measurements, and it was all put together in their offices. So that's well represented in the show. A kind of cross-section pieces up there. And actually, it's a good time to mention, too, that Diller Scofidio Renfro and their team designed the Alice Tully Hall, which congratulations to them, is very recently opened and looks great. We actually had a tour this morning, and they used felt in the lobby space, and actually primarily sort of a transition space between the lobby and the theater, which really has great impact visually and acoustically, of course, in the space. And it was a really great use of felt. And I don't have a photo, but you have to go and see it because it is in town. You can go and see a show there. And it's got great impact. Really a lot of felt, so it really helps to work with the sound, enhance the acoustics, and deaden the space. This was another design build project with George Yu Architects for Oxygen Media in Los Angeles. And again, we figured out sort of from an AutoCAD file, created these tiles and created a contractor-friendly sort of backing, put together tiles that we were able to ship to site, and they were installed there by their contractors. This was a piece that sort of takes the AutoCAD, the CAD/CAM system to an extreme here. We did these very large 6 panels. It was a collaboration with Levitt Goodman Architects in Toronto for a Native Services, a Family Services Center in Toronto, a new building that housed this facility, and it was a collaboration with the architects. These are moving walls, and they're layers of felt that are on this track that move across, and there's actually 3 sections that allow the space to be separated in different ways. And this was a large Thunderbird graphic that we came up with in collaboration with 7th Generation Image Makers, which are some artists that also occupy the space. And so you can see we had the cutouts. We took out the cutouts here. Is the pieces were taken out. You can see the dark felt underneath, and then those pieces were taken to the back to create a relief form of the same image. The striation series is also represented in the show that Susan mentioned, and this is a detail. I did this piece. I actually developed this piece with a firm here, B-Space Architecture. It was really one of the first projects where the architects wanted to create a sort of an effect of stacking felt to create these screening room doors. So again, over the course of sort of figuring out kind of some of the limitations of the material and the space and some of the needs of the client, we came to inlay these into these walnut frames. And I actually went down. Every time I do these sort of series of these strips, it's sort of a different process. In this case, I actually went down with boxes of strips and inlaid them into the doors on site. And it was time-consuming, but it was a manageable size, and it was actually a lot like painting as we sort of make choices, aesthetic choices along the way. This was for a Manhattan apartment residents in the Village. And this treatment, I had one other slide that went missing. Was that another couple of variations on the striation series? It was used. I'll just show you this one because another way that you can imagine it, we actually have produced typical panels in other situations where we were stacking, looking again to provide the effect of stacking layers. it was done for a couple of other sites that I'd like to show you. But anyways, you can imagine that we created different, like a typical panel that could be shipped, and then the finishing was done on site. And this was actually done sort of almost the extreme development of this is like an entire room we did with Yazdani Studio of Canon Design, and for the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles. And they'd created this round room, and we're interested. I'd seen a sample of the strips and wanted to do the whole interior. So from site measurements and visits, we created a number of typical panels and even produced the corners around the windows and around the screen, where you get sort of some very more specific kinds of shaping of the strips, the treatment. So we created all that and then shipped it down, and then I was sort of part of the project cost and went down to supervise the installation and actually sort of finger everything together to actually create this seamless effect. And that, well, this sort of also wanted to put this in because, as you can imagine, I've collected a number of remnants over a number of these projects, lots of felt strips. So I'm always trying to find ways to make use of these, and so these are a series of vessels, actually, that all are made from a 5-yard strip of felt. You can see the kind of variation that you can get. This is the third piece that's in the show. It's a molding that runs around the top of one of the panels in one of the galleries. And thank you to Susan. It was nice to have an opportunity to actually do something for the show specifically, and sort of site responsive, really. I wanted to pick up on the flora and fauna motifs of the great Georgian mansion here, and so I developed this unit that I repeated across in a pattern. And I like to note that actually, again, with this interest in maximum yield, each unit is made from 1 square foot of felt. And again, it's just a matter of how it's cut and stitched and pinched and folded. And so it's actually based. I had done a series of other friezes that Susan had seen, and again, was interested in playing with the contrasts of sort of this handmade, like this pattern, this repetition that is actually handmade, and the kind of contrast of working with this sort of cutting and manipulating this very fibrous material that actually in the end almost looks like carved stone. So it's kind of a nice play on form. And I created these as friezes. And these were mostly done as for sort of gallery context. So each sort of stream of work kind of for different contexts, sometimes for architectural spaces or galleries, and a variety of sites. And I'm just put this in to sort of show a few images to conclude. Actually, the felt studio, I started with handbags, and it's sort of become something that is a bit of I continue to do, but it's not as much. And but again, you can imagine that for producing these, and then I actually also do custom products. So despite my interest in maximum yield and always trying to do that, I do end up with a lot of remnants. So as you can see, I have I hate to throw them out because, as you know, like a piece of felt it's like a great object, like the Molo rocks, like in and of themselves, they're great pieces. They're great little objects. So then I've been doing this series of quilts. So this is a current project, and I think it's probably going to be an ongoing thing as I use up the remnants. There we are with and they're actually backed with a cotton backing, but the felt again is the surface, but it also provides kind of the batting. It itself is sort of the structure as well. And here you see the boxes of remnants, and they're machine stitched. This is one that is just before it's all stitched together. And again, it's a bit like painting, putting them all together. And that's me, and that's it. Thank you.
Kathryn, you grew up around felt because of your family business. Have you remained interested in it continuously throughout your life, or did you run away from it at some point to try to get away from the oppressiveness of felt in your family?
Yeah, a bit like that, I think, because I actually have a background in visual art before getting into felt studio, and yeah, that sort of came with moving away and living in different cities and different areas. I actually doing sort of sculpture and installation, but the felt, yeah, really came with moving back to Toronto, where I was from, and kind of reconnecting with my family, and having done some curating. I was interested. That show sort of just felt became the vehicle to bring it all together somehow. So and so since 2000, I guess, with doing that show, I've had felt around. And
this was the exhibition that Kathryn curated for the Textile Museum of Canada, which covered sort of the social history of felt, but also she invited 6 different artists to create new work using industrial felt, right?
Yeah, 4 artists, yeah.
4 artists, sorry, okay.
Yeah, so we had, it was becoming part of my
Did their
consciousness again.
interpretations of this material that was so familiar to you change your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think I really realized the scope, again, and that's how the company sort of started, as I realized how much you could do with it and the possibilities. So the research in terms of the beaver hats thing, but also the material kind of exploration was inspiring.
Great. Claudia, you became interested in felt a little later in life after studying fashion and working with other types of textiles, I believe, but quickly you made it your sole medium and seemingly life's work. What was so attractive to you about felt that you work with it now to the exclusion of all other types of materials?
I very much like the enormous simplicity of making felt. You can felt everywhere. You can felt with nothing. You can felt at any time, any place. It doesn't. Frankly, it doesn't cost anything. But it's so. I was so intrigued by this water. Fibers and friction method, but also the idea that people have lived their lives in these yurts and competed with weather and rain and I was so intrigued by the qualities and the properties of this material. This so ancient material, but so clever. Fantastic.
And right from the beginning, you wanted to do felt on a large scale. So how did your first architectural collaboration come about?
At that time, in Holland, architects were not ready for soft materials. They built only hard steel buildings. So it was also from this. Holland has although it has a textile tradition. At the time, architects were not very much interested in using softness. But there was one very big acoustic problem in a very large house. So the owner wanted, he dared to do a ceiling of 350 square meters. It was really very progressive also at the time, and it worked fantastic. So then you have one assignment and then you can show, and it went on.
So improving the acoustic environment seems to be a very big issue or a big reason why architects are interested in felt. So Claudia, what kinds of manipulations can you do in the hand felting process to improve the acoustic properties?
Not so much. No, because it's very complicated. Because often the space it depends on the space. Often on and not so in the felt, but more in the scale or in the thickness. Or if we use raw materials as silk, often they reflect a lot of noise. So in that way we work with the material, but not so much as in the material.
And Kathryn, as you said, you've done several concert hall projects, I believe, including the recently reopened Alice Tully Hall. Can you talk a little bit about the issues of using industrial felt as an acoustic material? We did supply the felt for the Alice Tully Hall, but and in that case, it really is having used it on the 2 walls and the ceiling really has a huge effect, especially when you're covering that much surface area. You do certainly have the emphasis, like the more surface area you cover, the more deadening of the absorption of the sound and deadening of the space. But I think it's effective. It's probably similar kind of
quality with the handmade, but it is very effective in absorbing sound, and depending how much you use it, and I think that, and the thickness too helps. The thicker the felt, the more absorption. But yeah, it is very effective, especially like a lot of architects using sort of the hard materials like the glass, and it's a nice counterpoint. Yeah.
So I know that they make industrial felt to very specific standards for the automotive industry, and so I'm always kind of wondering why it can't actually be rated as an acoustic material, or why it hasn't been rated as an acoustic material. Is it some intrinsic variability that is not surmountable?
Well, no, I think it has been tested. I think it's, yeah, I know we haven't done a lot of much testing in the acoustic area, like sort of interested in researching it. I've actually had some acoustic engineers even saying that the dense felt, which is actually sort of desirable because of its surface quality, the denser the felt you get, the less kind of abrasion, like, so it will hold up stronger, and you don't get the sort of wrinkling effect in the softer felt. So the very dense felt is often chosen for wall applications because of that surface, and yet it's maybe not quite as absorbent. But so there are just so many different variables in a way to the different densities, and but I think that for Alpha Tully Hall they certainly had to test it, and I was or in some of these larger projects. So I think it can be tested. Yeah, it's.
But I think
it is just absorbent, so it's sort of almost kind of known as being able to do that.
But also, besides this, that acoustic problems are very. I mean, we have a lot of projects when this is what we have to solve. But more and more also the experience in a room that it's been very hard and inhuman, and only that people, want it very much like this very attractive and tactile material. So for us, it's also changing from acoustics to that other.
You said that you actually used some of your stuff is backed with an acoustic material.
Yes.
So you're combining it. So are they actually adhered together, or they're sort of two separate?
Sometimes you have
hanging
layers with air between.
Yeah. Having space, I know, helps with most materials.
So I think for both of you, you have had independent acoustic testing done, but it's very much on a project-by-project basis, without any kind of standardization. I mean, particularly in your case, because everything is unique every time.
Yes.
So Claudia, also you mentioned that several of your recent commissions have been for hospital or therapeutic environments, and I found that to be an interesting contradiction, that there's so much research money going into the production of antimicrobial finishes, for instance, or basically, yes, antiseptic fabrics, and yet the simultaneous interest in the healing properties of natural materials. And I wondered if this contradiction had come up in any of the conversations that you've.
No. No, there is there is a need for this specific material, and this need comes from. I mean, that's a technical. What you mentioned is a technical topic, but for us, it's first the problem of what do people or patients experience in these spaces, and that in Holland it's very important that these healing qualities are. That they are very important, and also in designing we get a lot of freedom also, and also what's about the library in Amsterdam. I mean, 3 million people a year. We get a lot of freedom in design, or the Blue Diamond. I mean, it's a closed in a way, closed space. So we do not have to deal with what you maybe on a
compulsive hygiene.
No, maybe on a later stage, but not yeah. So that's nice, because then you are more free to develop. Yes. Yeah. But maybe it works here different. I think so.
Social and environmental responsibility is central to both of your work, but starting at kind of opposite ends of the production chain. Claudia is a primary producer, raising your own sheep, growing your own dye plants, and Kathryn recovering and recycling what's essentially industrial waste. So Claudia, I understand that your flock is used as part of a managed grazing program to sustain the landscape of Friesland where your studio is located. Can you tell me how that works?
We try to find communities, and you see often also in some small towns also where the sheep being used as landscape preservation or parks. So it's more and more common in Holland that the landscape also landscape in the city is being preserved in that way, because it's more natural and also the dikes, when they have been grazed by sheep, they get very strong, so it's also very useful. Yeah.
So they use the flock of sheep in lieu of any kind of machinery.
Yeah.
In this delicate
environment. Yes. Yes.
And I understand also that your Drent Heath sheep are an endangered species.
Mm-hmm.
And so is it also a kind of managed breeding? Are you trying to increase the numbers? And how successful has that been?
Yeah, or at least keep them in our environment. And but yeah, Holland is, as you know, is very small, so we do not have that much space also. So we try to control it a bit. Yes. Yes, because it's very limited. We do not have enough heath or meadows where they can graze. Yes.
I mean, you personally, or you, Holland?
Holland. Holland.
Okay. So another face of the issue of responsible design is the preservation of knowledge. I know that Claudia, you developed an intense interest in natural dyes.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have difficulty finding people with the expertise in these dye stuffs?
Yeah,
in order
enormous
to train you?
difficulties. It's a very closed, I was surprised, it's a very closed, I don't know how you call the word, circuit. I mean, you can find recipes in ancient books, but really the experience of dyeing is also practical. But it's there. There was a big secret cloud hanging over this. A lot of people did plant dyeing. So we found in England, a few dyers, and they come over and they train up people, and they do traditional vegetable dyeing, and then we try to do things which we should not do. So making own colors or boiling up or doing unorthodox things, because I like doing bringing it into this into a contemporary way, and also making dyeing with herbs gives a totally different expression to colors. But
the herbs that are not traditionally dye plants.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And did you have a hard time finding access to the plants themselves or the seeds? Was that kind of a botanical research project, or?
Yeah, we're working on that now, and working together with botanical gardens and exchanging seeds. So that is now starting, and we hope at the end of the year that this garden will be finished. Yes.
And are you actually going to produce dyes from this garden, or is this more of an educational tool at this point?
Exactly, and hopefully when we have experienced this for a few years, then we maybe one or two of the dye plants we will try to to produce for our own supply. But for now, it's more like a laboratory and research field. Yes.
And Kathryn, you and I have talked a little bit about how there's a kind of natural empathy for the loss of traditional handcraft, but not necessarily so quickly for the loss of factory skills. But when I visited the felt factory in Toronto, I was very impressed by the level of human expertise that is still required for this very mechanized process, particularly, I think, because the raw material is a natural material that is different every time, every season. So I just wanted, since you have this kind of long, generations-old history, if you could speak to the loss of human expertise in industrial felt production.
It's not lost yet. But yeah, it's true. I mean, in North America, it's sort of definitely there's been a decline. It's become almost a bit more rarefied, to felt production. I think in Europe there's, more sophisticated commitment to quality that perhaps in North America gets forfeited for bottom line. So you get, so there's not as much production for sure in North America, but it's still there, and I think it tends to be specialized, like, the specifications are for, it's been replaced by a lot of things, but the kind of specialty felts like piano felts, it's unsurpassed, and, it's capable, like, I think they've tried to replace these kinds of things with other materials, but always come back to felt, and, again, it's that wool, dense pressed wool that is, I think, unsurpassed in wicking quality, and as long as we have machines, we'll have to keep having felt, I think. So it's still there, but it's true, it is not as common. And I think it's another research project, because I'd love to do more, and I've actually interviewed another factory that we've worked with, is actually just closed this year, and I'd interviewed the owner because I was just interested. Again, it was passed to his son, and but they just couldn't make it work. And but just trying to even interview some of these people who have been doing it for generations. And it's often a family business that gets passed down. And often it's Germans that are the family business that gets passed down. But it's I think it's an interesting phenomenon, but that sort of family thing too. But yeah, to find out a bit more, because I think there's always been an almost a sort of camaraderie too between felt making companies too, like just an understanding, because they have to come up with specifications that cross, the market. So I think it's historically interesting.
Yeah, I was particularly fascinated by your slide with the car and the 31 different places in the automobile that felt was used that looked like it was from the 1940s, 50s.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm wondering if now isn't the moment when we return in our new green economy to using wool felt. I'm sure that many of those have since been replaced with synthetic felts, but perhaps this is the moment to make a return to wool. Claudia, do you find your clients are more concerned with sustainability issues than they were 10 years ago?
Yes. Especially what we experience is that people find it very important that they know where it comes from. You can tell the story, and it's been made local, and it's very durable. And yes, we experience that it's this ecological awareness is very much alive. Yes.
Well, I know that we have a very knowledgeable audience here this evening, so I would like to open it up to questions from the audience. The program is being taped, so please wait for the microphone before you ask your question. Thank you.
Hi. This is a very practical question. In terms of the wall hangings and like the background for the bed, how do you protect the material against moths and other insects?
Yeah. Well, so far so good. Well, you can protect it. I think there are some sprays, but I don't know. I haven't had the problem of it yet. But I think in industrial felts it's not that common. I don't know. It's whether I haven't had to encounter that, but I think there may be some treatments.
And also, what we advise also in stable situations, there are moth detecting things. So then when you can measure, and then you can take you can treat it. But also, what's more important is that that the fabrics are being moved so that the eggs cannot nestle. But in fact you cannot you cannot protect. No. You be alert. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for Claudia about how you, your actual work process. You work with machines, right? Felting machines?
More and more handmade.
Oh,
yes, because of more art installations we're going now. Yes.
So
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about the piece that you have in the show in terms of how you put it together?
Yes, we build it really one-to-one scale in Holland because it's about experience and mood experience. So you have to get into enter these spaces, and what I would like to show is for example the color matter, but also because of its medical properties, qualities. How do you experience it when you cover a wall and go in, and also with the St. John's wort. So then we build it up, and I thought it was like a landscape in materials, but also landscape in time. Historically speaking, it tells about its heritage, but tells you also about the materials, hand-spun yarns, and lost traditions. Is that enough?
Further to the earlier question about moth damage, how do you wash these things or just keep them clean? Can you vacuum them or?
Yes.
Vacuum,
Yes.
yeah, good.
So then if you have something that's 20, 40 feet tall, have a 40-foot long.
Nobody will see it. But we have it also in hospitals, and they vacuum clean it once in a while. But yeah.
Question for Kathryn. The colors in the industrial felt, what leads to those colors? And secondly, what is the source of the wool? The commercial sources for the wool.
Yeah, you mean the colors in the variation in the gray?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it actually is, well, as you would know, the sheep's, depending on the season, the color of the wool that it changes, and so that's a variable. And then in the manufacture of the carding of the fiber, often depending again on the density and the specification, a certain amount of recycled kind of thread waste and other fibers can be thrown into the mix. And so depending on whether that's denim or like other kinds of other fibers also will vary the tone. So it's hard to control. I mean, you can customize with a larger kind of quantity. You can customize the color to a certain point, but there's always going to be variation, even from sort of roll to roll within a batch. There will be slight differences because of the way wool mixes. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you get a lot of variation just within the gray, and it can be quite warm or it can be quite cool. So. What you had a second part? What was
the wool? Where does it come from?
Oh yeah, and then it can be from, I guess, the sheep raising countries, really that's sort of unfortunately kind of a shipping thing. That's a global, it adds to the footprint, I guess, but it does come from often like New Zealand and South Africa. I know are two big sources.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and where there's sheep, there's wool.
I first want to start with a comment. I appreciated the comment about the textiles in healthcare, antiseptic in nature in North America and healing in nature in Holland. And I think there's an underlying commentary about the healthcare system in general in those two locations. But my question is actually quite technical for both Claudy and Kathryn, and it's about the system you use to adhere the felt to whatever the substrate may be in all of these various applications we've seen.
Or to glue the felt? If you glue. We usually do not glue anymore. We do it now in a historical way, stretch them and how do you say it? Stable. Yes. So not because then it has also this when you use it as a wallpaper, it's very static. So I like it no more that it's still a bit alive and that it can move a bit. So we stretch it often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, adhesives are used often with the industrial felt when it's, put right onto the wall. And we try to use a, green product where like water-based glues and and you know that can be time consuming because often they have to have a drying, like a tack, sort of. You have to wait till one side is dry, so you have a tack. Especially on a vertical, you want to have that. So, but there's various. You know, some contractors will use like a rug adhesive. You know, like contractors have their tricks. You know, they'll always have different things to use, but. Unfortunately, some of those aren't very friendly, but yes, often glue is used to put the felt on the wall. It can be hung, like it's nice actually if you are able to have a, you know, and to create a space in behind and you're able to be in a situation where that can be done. That's a nice way to do it, but yeah, often it does use adhesives. But.
I was wondering about the lanolin aspect of wool. I noticed in Claudy's installation there was this wonderful aroma of the sheep, which
smell
was
it?
actually quite beautiful. You put your nose right into it. But obviously that's a big ingredient in sheep's wool is this lanolin. What happens to it in the processing for the industrial felts? Because obviously there's no...
Yeah, well, it's a... Yeah. Well, there is if you sort of get it wet, it is still there if you go up to it. But it does get washed out. It has, you know, in the sort of scouring process. But, you know, yeah, it's because the lanolin's what keeps the felt from.
So is there still lanolin in the felt?
What's that?
Is there still this lanolin in the felt?
No,
or is it
because you have to get
completely
rid of it
gone?
really, right? Because that's what keeps the fibers separate. So that oil, it's an oil that, but no, so it says washed out in the carding and the washing of the fibers. So.
And
so
one other very quick question is boiled wool felt?
No. It's sort of felted, right? Because it's, I think, you know, it's a woven, generally boiled wool is a woven fabric that is then felted. And
Fulled.
so fulled, thank you.
Fold
Thank you.
is the technical term.
What is the technical term?
Fold.
Pulled.
Fold.
Fulled.
Another term is walked.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I never heard that.
But it starts from either a woven or a knitted textile, which is then given a density and a surface finish by fulling, washing, and rubbing. Whereas true felt has no intrinsic structure. It goes directly from the raw fiber to this matted material.
We're back in the front row, sorry. I have a couple questions. First of all, Claudy, for you, I'm in awe of the size of your pieces, and I've done a little bit of felt myself, so I know the how difficult it is to handle those large pieces. How do you manage them and make such amazingly huge pieces?
It's hard work. No, it's true. We have now. I had a studio in Amsterdam for 10 years, but scaling up was very difficult because of space there. And now we have on the countryside, we have a huge working space. So we have large tables, and I mean, it's really a matter of space.
Do you use cranes?
Cranes?
Cranes, like a hook that lifts something with an arm?
Oh, no, we have big washing machines recently because it's getting very heavy and very it's too hard physically, and we work with a few people, but so we have made it in some point a bit easy, but by these washing machines just to
fold the
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But more and more, it's being more handmade. So making these big pieces, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other question is, when you're working with the commercial installations, do they ever build in a wear factor? Because it seems like with 3 million people...
What is a wear factor?
Wear factor. If a piece needs to be replaced because people have handled it so much, are the installations ever created so that in 2 years you will replace a panel, or do you?
No. In Holland, you have some companies who can. Is it about damage or about cleaning?
Both.
Okay. Something with damage, then we try to restore it, and then you sometimes you see it or not. Depends on how complicated it is. And with cleaning, we have some companies who clean at the spot. So
I see.
And that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a further question about the fulling or final hardening, felting of the really large pieces. Is the washing machine used for the very final stages? In other words, first you're laying everything out.
Yes.
Yeah? And then you roll it?
You roll it.
Are you kicking it? Or how many, when you're doing these 30 feet, I can't imagine it. I can't
Camels.
get my head around this.
Hardworking people in Holland. No, the washing machine is for carpets. Yes, that's true, because then you have this very last stage, and it gets a very tough quality. But sometimes you find something out with your people and doing it in a very primitive way, in shaking it or like pastry. I don't know. We do strange things.
I mean, are you rolling?
Also,
are you rolling it up
yes.
and kicking it? Maybe 10 people, or
Yes, a lot of people. That's true.
And for how long? For instance, the photo on the cover of the book.
That was a very, but then you have such a project. You have many stages. So there are a few people working on the knotting technique, and then there are a few people on the dyeing. So you have these divisions and building it up. But that was a long project. And for the real felt making, the part of the making itself has been done now mechanically, and we had to find some engineers who invented something very clever. so it's but that's only a part of the production, maybe 20%. The main part is the laying, the first stages. And this friction technique, I mean, it really, frankly, it's more easy, but we do a lot still by hand. Yes.
Anyone else have questions?
Just, is the word for felt the same in Dutch?
Filt.
Can you speak to the etymology of the word? Either one of you.
Yeah, I know that actually felt in German, filz, is also filter, and which is one of its sort of significant qualities. So it's, and the Germans definitely they associated with felt for, a long time. But I do know that. But then in English, I'm not sure. It's a great word. Yeah, do you know?
No.
No. Like in Dutch, it's just
no.
Always been, it's the material,
Claudia, I have a question for you. If I understood correctly, there are other materials you can felt with, not just sheep's wool. Is that correct? Didn't you mention something about, or do you just incorporate other types of animal hair?
We incorporate.
But it is still mainly sheep's wool?
Yeah, you can use sheep's wool as like a binder. The merino is a fantastic wool which combines like the silks or the linens or the cashmere, and gives it a good quality. So we use a lot of merino also. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, other animal fibers definitely can be felted. Like, especially in the millinery trade, you get rabbit for hats and beaver. It was big, as I said, in the 1700s, and it's still made, I think. I know the Mountie hat is actually a rabbit fur. It's like, but some of those are a finer felt too. So, and they wouldn't be produced and used to produce, large sheet goods. It's right, though the sheep's wool is definitely used in the industrial application. But yeah, the millinery trade, I think, uses different. Yeah.
But if silk fibers, for instance, are incorporated into the layup, they themselves do not actually felt or become entangled. They're kind of trapped by the wool fibers. So really only animal hair fibers will engage in the felting process because of their structure.
Time for one more question?
Hi, this question is for Claudy, and I just wanted to ask regarding your transition from fashion to textiles to interiors. I know it's a bit personal, you don't have to answer it, but what's your thoughts and how you did it? And was felting self-taught? Did you go to school? Did you just take a workshop and were inspired? I mean, how did the transition occur?
When I was trained as a fashion designer, and I had after working in the industry for 4 years, I had big problems with the production and the structure of these collections, 4, 5, 6 a year. So at that time I saw this exhibition on traditional felt and I took a simple course of 1 week, and I was so intrigued by this, what I said about this simplicity. I was lost, so I immediately gave up my job. But with this fashion background, I could involve these materials I knew, so that helped a lot. And then I just started making small samples, and then after a year I scaled them up. And what I like about interior projects is that you can experience the material in a space, and of course you can do it in a clothing, but I think it's different in a space. And I mean, it's also for everybody. Everybody can get closer and really use this tactility, seduction. Yeah. Is that enough?
Well, thank you both very much, and thank you all for coming.